Sniffing. I don't know what's this worse, the sniffing or the nose blowing. I'll get that over with. So the title of this evening's talk is Save All Beings. That's correct. That's an easy one. Pardon me for sniffing. Saving all beings actually is not so easy. I had this turned to a page. Probably lost it. There it is. So in the four vows we do here when we during the service, Shu Jo Muhen Se Gando, is beings are without number. I vow to liberate them all. That's a pretty big project. We could look at what liberation actually is. We could actually, what does it mean to liberate or free someone? We could start by not meddling with them, making things worse for them based on your presumptions, your preconceptions about what they should or shouldn't do. Very pragmatically, that would be a pretty good start for anyone, whether you're a Buddhist or not. Stop meddling with people. Or mind your own business. Possibly might help someone even more. So the way we say this vow is in Jukai, the way I like to say it is be with all things. Actually be, whatever's arising, be with that. That doesn't mean you have to cave and be a wimp. Just fall prey to anything that comes your way because you need to be with it. So you just need to not do anything with it, not fight with it. That may be more like avoiding it. When I say, when it is said, I vow to be with all things. What you're actually doing is you're going to work on, aspire to, be with things as they are. And so the challenge there is being able to see, are you seeing things as they are? Or are you seeing things as you think they are? In other words, this is called an opinion. And the way I say often, have said over and over again, the way you can practice doing that is the practice of meditation. Just like Bodhidharma did in the 5th century, 6th century. Came from ancient India, as I said during the meditation instruction this evening. Traveled to China, bringing the mind-only teachings. I actually brought a copy, I think it was the Lankavatara Sutra, to give to his students. And he sat and faced a wall. So the reason the legend says he sat and never moved, and one of his students, cut off his arm and gave it to him. It's just a way of saying that he helped him along. I mean, how else are you going to say that back in those days? In other words, he did whatever he said. He gave him his hands, he gave him his arm. Whatever he needed, he did. He waited on him, served him, was very, very devoted to him. Another way of talking about it. The same thing with, the legend has it, he cut out his eyelids. And of course, he cut out his eyelids. I was there, I know. No, what that means is that he meditated with his eyes open. As far as he could, he had his eyes open. So what does that tell us? Perhaps maybe by just guesswork, it tells us that probably people meditated with their eyes closed quite often. Or not. It's hard to say. But to take one of the six sense fields and deliberately shut it down so that you can have a better mindfulness experience or a better meditation experience is a misunderstanding of practice. Not that you couldn't do that some. If the desire, the wish, the procedure arises out of your awareness, then by all means, I wouldn't presume to correct someone who said, most of the day people have told me this, come and say, I couldn't seem to keep my eyes open today. I had sat with my eyes closed all day during an all-day retreat. I'm not going to disagree with that. They already know that I teach shikantaza or zazen. Sit still, hold very still, watch what moves. Watch the breath, that's moving. Or watch your thoughts, they're probably moving. And if you're doing that and at some point you sit and you close your eyes, it's not incorrect. You're doing it out of your own awareness. You're doing it out of your own understanding of what's happening to you. And you may need to close your eyes, but much better that it comes from you and your awareness practice rather than some arbitrary dude or dudette telling you what to do. You need to have your eyes open. You need to have your eyes closed. You should do this, you should do that. That being said, we still need to get instruction from someone, and it's good to get instruction from someone who's been doing this a while. I mean, I have to blow my nose again, excuse me. So being with all things, the practice of to be with all things, sitting down, holding very still, and whatever occurs in the mind, practice just being with that. It's just like being with a cloud, being with a fish in the water, being with the weather, being with someone who's telling you something, explaining their new job or their new relationship or their broken toaster. You're just listening. You're just with them. You're listening. You're listening to what's happening. You're watching the weather. You're watching fish. You're watching clouds. You're watching traffic, for that matter. And by doing this, we practice meeting things where they are, being with things as they are. Not easy, especially when whatever that is arising is challenging to us and maybe looking right at us, and maybe it's pointing its finger at us and saying, maybe even accusing us. That's very difficult to be with that. But when we're saying be with all things, we're also saying you may need to be with your temper, be with your agitation. So we're not going the other way and shutting, you don't get to be anybody because you're so busy being with all things. No, you're included in that, be with all things. And only you really know how to work with that. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you shouldn't get help or talk to someone about it or even talk to a teacher or something, but the fundamental situation is you have to do it. So when you're on the cushion, this is the way in which I say trust yourself. And when I say trust yourself, I do not mean believe your thoughts. That's more like not trusting yourself. To believe your thoughts. Thoughts are lies, just about every one of them. If you can give me an example of a thought that's not a lie, let me see it. I'll show you how it's just exactly what you said it was. Go ahead.
The idea that thoughts are lies.
Yeah, what about it?
Is that not a lie?
Yeah.
So if thoughts are lies,
yes,
then just saying that thoughts are lies is a lie.
Well, yes, it would be.
Which is positing the truth.
I wouldn't go that far.
How far would you go?
Not quite that far. It's sure we can have fun chatting back and forth this way. And so when I say thoughts are lies, I don't mean there isn't some kind of relative truth to things, but ultimately our thought patterns are actually fabrications of the sixth, seventh, and eighth consciousness around whatever the rest of the consciousnesses are perceiving. Sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of seeing. We think something about other things. And so in order to actually meet everything where it's at, you have to stop adding on to it, making up things about it. In other words, fabrications, in order to really see what it is. And that particular experience of seeing what something actually is may feel very ordinary. It may feel extraordinary. It may feel flat. It may feel even. It may feel dull. It may feel fluffy. It may. All kinds of things could have come up in that situation. There's not enough consistency there to validate. Yes.
Will seeing something as it actually is include our ideas about what it is?
Probably wouldn't leave anything out. It would include that. It would include your own identity, who you are. It would include what that actually is in and of itself. So it would be pretty complete. There wouldn't be much extra. There wouldn't be any extra. Or something that had been left out that you thought of later that, oh, this should have had this too. So, Mark.
Buddhism, as you teach it, doesn't seem to have any kind of a moral compass, as far as I can tell. So how can I know right from wrong? Just by intuition, or?
Well, the three pure precepts are do good, don't do harm, and be with all things, or save all beings. So don't do things that are so that's a pretty strong injunction. Don't do harm. Don't hurt people. Don't. The simplest way, or the very direct way I just said, is mind your own business. That's a really good way to work with it. Is don't jump into other people's territory without permission from them, without being invited into there, rather than jump in based on your preconceptions. This doesn't mean if a child runs into the road, you don't need to go in front of traffic. You don't need to go check with their mom. You would save them. You don't need to think about that in that way. But as far, I don't necessarily do some kind of instruction on it. But you should ask more about that, because I have more to say, but it needs to be tuned into the way in which you're asking it. Let's finish with Mark here.
Are you a situational ethics kind of person?
I don't even know Bonhoeffer. Is that where you got it?
Yeah.
And I really don't. Actually, I just think it's a nice name.
Yeah. So you would say operate out of awareness, probably. I'm guessing.
And there's something to situation ethics. I mean, in other words, each situation brings up its own set of ideas and standards and so on. Just talking to someone today where there was and not only today, a few days ago, just saying where this is a time where you need to lie, because it's not going to be helpful to tell this person. It's no one in here, but it's in another situation on the phone with somebody at a distance. That's also a lie, of course. So yeah, you would be very considerate of people's feelings, and you would know if you've worked on your own feelings, you've worked with your own mind, you know how difficult it is to work with your own the hopes and fears, and so it makes you very, very sensitive to everyone else. And sometimes it gets pretty overwhelming. You may not show that, you may not break down in tears all the time, or run around fretting like an old grandmother or grandfather, I should say. You're welcome. But you would look at it and you would realize it just by seeing it. You would go, this is not a good time to tell this person about what she said about what he said. It's just not time to do that. Whereas some people, because they're so concerned about themselves, it's called ego, they will say, well, I have to be honest with you. I think you're stupid. I don't think that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, we can see people doing it. They're so interested in their own kind of structure, their identity and so on. They'll say things that are harmful. They're not really helpful to people. So you could say it's situational in that way. You meet things where they're at, and sometimes where they're at doesn't fall in line with. Sometimes I have said to take it to extreme, hoping to drum up more questions. I'll say, so you may have to murder somebody. And there's lots to be said about that. One of the things I say to ask people, I said, if I had to choose right now, you have to make one choice. You have to do it right now. If you don't, you don't get any more allowance. I'm not giving anybody an allowance anymore. I say you have to choose. If you had to be one of these, would you be a victim or a murderer? Which one? Choose. Everybody choose right now. Victim or murderer? Which one?
Victim.
Murder.
I think I'd be a victim.
See, look how it goes back and forth. And there's something to be said for both of them, but this is an example of non-duality, or not two. You would be a victim because you can't murder anyone. You just can't do it. You have to be a victim. But then you could also say, no, I'd rather be a murderer, so that person doesn't have to be a murderer, because I know that's the crime, and I don't want anybody to have to be that. So I'll take it upon myself. I'll be the murderer. You won't have to do that. A little bit more transcendental way of thinking about it. But this is always up for grabs. There is no right and wrong. Right and wrong is an invention of narcissism, very refined kind of narcissism, but it's an invention. There are no rules. So morality needs to, from my understanding, morality needs to come out of your awareness, your raw, pure understanding of what is happening. This is a lot more risky when it comes to ego. Ego's not really supported by someone operating out of just bare attention, because it's like, what if this crazy awareness takes us in a place that is embarrassing? What if people start making fun of me because I'm giving away all my money or something? More on that, Mark?
So if I'm dealing with a situation where I need some hard and fast rules, I need some different clue.
You need to know right from wrong right away.
Yeah.
Just give me a call. And I'll say, don't do that, Mark. That's crazy. Don't do that. Or else you might say, yeah, go right ahead. That'll be fine.
The three, what did you say they were? The three pure precepts?
Yeah, don't do harm, do good, and be with all things. Be with all things is the bodhisattva vow, the vow to put everyone else ahead of yourself. And of course, this is an aspiration. It's about impossible to do that. As long as there's some kind of self-centeredness going on, you won't be able to do that. And if you think you're doing that, this is a highly refined ego talking. You think you're saint-like. No one knows what a saint I am. Quite often we'll hear people say, I always think of others first. Quite often we hear people think, I just put everybody before myself, and that's, and it's just a highly refined form of bullshit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Further questions, since we're in a question and answer mode here? Sheldon?
The questions that Kevin and Mark both had.
Yes.
First, the conversation that you had with Kevin.
You really want to go back there?
Yeah.
You call that a conversation?
Yeah,
I go ahead.
but there was something to
Of course.
Okay.
There is.
Can you express what that was? Can you break it down to a basic expression of non-dual?
Can I?
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I said. You tell me what I said.
You
and
said
I'll break it.
that all words are lies,
I did.
and Kevin said, well, then doesn't that mean saying that all words are lies is a lie, which in essence negates the whole situation.
Wait, I'm gonna check within you.
Is it thoughts? All thoughts are lies.
All thoughts are lies. Sorry, all thoughts are lies.
The big difference between a word and a thought.
Yeah, I don't know how big of a
You can't spell a thought. But you can spell a word. How'd you spell it?
How's my spelling?
Or your thoughts?
Always there.
Always there. So what's your question?
So, about that, and also about Mark's question and about the,
Yes.
that question kind of falls into, it easily falls into fundamentalism, you know, 3 pure precepts. It's easy to grab a hold of those and have a fundamentalist view
You
of that
could, yeah.
situation. So it seems important. to
You can
have-
do that with any time you have some kind of the 16 pure precepts, very much. And of course, a theistic approach is even more difficult to work with that, because then you have a central authority that somebody thinks they speak for. But go ahead.
So how do we keep a view of those situations that is non-dual? How do we?
Stop trying to keep a view. Keeping a view is just a fancy word for fixation. Everything is shifting all the time. Nothing lasts. More. Let's keep going. Keep going.
Well, how can you look at it without having a view of it? I mean, we're talking about it, so we're looking at it.
I didn't say to not have a view.
Don't try that.
You don't do anything with it. Don't accept it. Don't reject it. Don't look away. Those are the three poisons that bring us. So there are going to be times when you're very tempted by a particular area, and don't do anything with it. Don't try to turn it back. Don't freak out, panic, run the other way. This is a very sneaky ego. As has been said, is just it's without end. It's circular. It's like a tilt-a-whirl. You get on it, and you can't get off, because it just goes around and around and around. There's more there if you want to keep going.
I wouldn't know how to ask more about it.
Well, aren't by nature the 3 poisons of view?
Say more.
Well, if we study this idea of not to accept, not to reject, not to ignore, and we integrate it into our thought process, isn't that like holding a view?
Sure.
How do we not hold?
All you have to do is see that you're holding views. It's always about awareness. It's never about any positionality on anything. All you have to do is see it, and it can take all kinds of forms. One can get very strong, one can get weak. The way of talking about it, as far as the path to give instructions, is saying don't add, don't subtract, don't divide. But we know you can't help but do that. You can't help it. You just can't help it. I can't help it. But if you endeavor to see to not do that, then that brings your mind to the way you keep pushing on something, and the way you keep pulling, aggression, passion, and the way you shut down or divide yourself from things. So I say, don't do the math. Don't do that. But of course, we all keep doing it. I'm still doing it myself. But when the awareness is really powerful around that kind of functionality, then the self-centeredness starts to show up. It's like it's outlined with neon. You can see your incessant insistence on having some kind of a credential. Even as a bad guy, you need some credential. Some people go that direction. They've been so tortured so much, they just decided, screw it, I'm just going to be evil. I'm just going to be really, really bad. I'm going to be the baddest guy around, or girl. Why is that funny? Bad Leroy Brown. That's my middle name, Leroy. Here I am giving a serious Dharma talk.
I was thinking it, she said it.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
is this an example of the right view is according to the Eightfold Path, to hold no views or to view?
It's just to be very, very clear about views. Yeah, right view is don't step on any, don't board any train out of town. Don't go anywhere. Just see as clearly as you can what's happening, and that'll be a little bit different for everyone because everyone's recipe or combination of causes and conditions is so completely varied. Yes, sir.
Sometimes the Eightfold Path, instead of the word right, they use the word complete.
Yes.
What is a complete view?
So complete comes from the Sanskrit word samyak. It means thorough. It means you've completely looked at the entire situation. Its positive parts, its negative parts, looked at all sides of it. You've thoroughly, you've looked at it clearly and completely, not just out of some kind of conceptual situation. So complete would just be like thorough, far going, deeply. You've looked at it deeply.
You sometimes say a thing to be both and neither.
I
For
do.
example, you said, I asked you about free will and determinism, what Buddhism says
Yeah.
about that. You said both. Nagarjuna says both and neither.
Nagarjuna.
Yeah. So could you rehash how that is? How is that possible that a thing is both and neither?
I don't know if I can rehash particularly, but it's just saying that anytime you posit anything, it creates its opposite. And then if you try to do a right and wrong situation, or this is correct and this is incorrect, that it just takes us in a circular way. And Nagarjuna, and then around the first century of the Common Era, wrote Mula Madhyamika Karika, I think it's called, and that's fundamental teachings on the middle way or something like that, translates. But anyway, his fourfold negation is it's neither true, nor is it false, nor is it both, nor is it neither. So it just shows you that anything that you state can be refuted, and so you can that polarity carries into not being there and being there in the sense of both of them, and not being there or being there in the sense of the opposite of those. But it's enough to give you a headache. But according to some philosophers, it pretty much puts an end to philosophy, because any position you take, Nagarjuna's tetralemma, the fourfold negation, could basically destroy it. And the way in which it works with that is right down to identity. That there's no solid. We're not saying you're not here. We're not saying that there isn't something happening here, but it is not a solid self. It's completely moving and in flux all the time. Even the body, even though it's here, is in flux. It's aging. It's slowly disintegrating, changing all the time. The diseases are coming and going. There's so many things that are variable. So bringing awareness to this whole situation where things are in constant movement, it seems to be really powerful, because when we do that, we see so much going on that we kind of give up on our little petty thought patterns and agendas about others, our judgments of others, or we stop giving ourselves a hard time, because we realize that you're not going to be able to make this person that you are into some perfect person, or someone who's never makes a mistake or something. So it's very circular. More? Anything? Yes.
The kind of circular logic that we tend to get trapped in Is it just to keep us from grasping at these concepts and wanting some solid thing to hang on to?
Yeah, well, it could be.
So
What do you
is
think?
it then even worth pursuing those kinds of questions and activities concerning the not this, not that, not both, not neither,
Yeah, that's right.
as opposed to just letting that be okay without it?
I think I'm following you. And I would say we don't go deep into, we study the sutras, we study the the basic teachings of Buddhism, but we don't go way down into with a bunch of deep logical kind of arguments and so on about everything. It's just it's difficult. Not everyone is equipped with a strong ability to handle that kind of material, and so it's just a way of talking about it and working with it that's conceptual. So the most important thing to me is that we can do is sitting practice of meditation. We don't do enough of that. I highly recommend that be as strong as possible. And then also do some study. So you're working with if this is in fact what you're asking me, is to work with some conceptual ideas so that you're working with because the conceptual mind is the one that traps things down into belief and disbelief. And we just believe some things and disbelieve others. And sometimes the disbelief is so powerful that it's just as damaging as a belief. It can be just as damaging. Like the projection onto things, like let's say just this neighborhood where there's this temple monastery where people have been living and practicing for years. There are neighbors out here that are just a door away that have no idea what's going on here in actuality, but have ideas about it. They have, I'm not saying it's bad, but or that they're accept us or reject us or do anything, but they have really strong preconceptions. Even if you come in the door and sit down and watch everything that happens, see the service and listen to the Dharma talk, without an awareness practice, it's very difficult to see what this is really fundamentally about. You may be making some progress if you can come here and have no opinions or judgments about it, but that's rare, if not impossible, to have something happen and not have some idea about what it is. So just like some people will come in and they're fine, they can bow, prostrate, they're not particularly hooked on forms, so therefore they're free to practice them or not. Other people are hooked on forms and actually think they're not because they don't believe in that stuff. They're not about to do that. And that's just as big a blinder as being attached to the forms, wanting to do a lot of ritual. So is that helpful, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. In the studies, there's more than just that. In the readings, there's more offered than what seems to always come down to, if it's not this and not that, what is it? That argument.
It's not just that. The actual studying of the material in this situation here, and why I encourage it so much, is more about Sangha than anything. It's about being with people who are doing the same practice you're doing. They're working on their mind. You're working on your mind. You're looking at a teaching that was given in the 4th century that is a root text of Buddhism, of Chan and Zen Buddhism. It's the foundation for this kind of teaching that has been going on for centuries. And you and this other person who are working on studying this together, or several other people, and are discussing it, and you see how really different everyone approaches everything. And so it really tells you a lot about your relationship to other human beings based on a really powerful teaching on awareness practice and on relative and ultimate truth. So it's extremely powerful for Sangha. Only the people who have been doing this for a few years we'll be able to see how powerful it is. And it's not about knowing things. It's not about you can study the Samdhinirmachana Sutra and be able to explain it. And if you can, please explain it to me. I'm not just saying that. That's not a difficult or an easy text to understand. The Thomas Cleary text, Buddhist Yoga, the Keenan translation of the Samdhinirmachana Sutra, or the John Powers translation. They're all different translations out of Chinese and Sanskrit, and they're all saying, attempting to say the same thing. But I'm still not really clear on what's being said there. So it's quite interesting to bring people together and have people study this material together and see what happens. So am I addressing at all what you're saying? So it seems to be very important it's quite often missed in our, people read a book and they put it down. They might ask somebody a question about it, but it's rare for someone to sit down with other people and actually discuss the book, where it takes you a year to get through the book or more. So, but it's not just, going back to what you said, it's not just about the three choices you came up with. It's not so much about grasping onto the right understanding as opposed to the wrong understanding, although that is there also. More?
Well, that seems to be the desire. From this point of view, that seems to be the desire.
Yeah.
To grasp on the correct
Yes.
viewpoint.
Well-
And so those kinds of circular arguments, for me anyway, tend to obliterate that need for that period of time. The need to have a solid right view.
Good.
And so if that's what it's supposed to do, then that works.
It's supposed to do some of that, but it's also very much about Sangha. And it's very much about the Dharma, or everything is dependently arisen, the basic teaching of the Buddha. Nothing comes from its own side as an individual thing. It's dependent on everything else for its apparent singularity or identity. Question?
When you, at the beginning, you mentioned the first of the four vows, beings are without number. What does that mean? What is trying to be said that beings are without number?
It means that they're uncountable. You can't count them. So it's infinite beings. You and me and beings, living consciousnesses are without number. They can't be counted. They're countless. You could just as easily say, beings are countless. I vow to liberate them all. So you're making a statement. You're observing a vow that's just impossible, relatively speaking, to accomplish. That's why this path is sometimes the Bodhisattva path is sometimes thought of as heroic, because absolutely it's like the myth of Sisyphus, who's rolling a rock up the hill just for it to roll back down, or the Cervantes book Don Quixote, tilting at windmills, going after just phantoms. Another kind of hero, someone who just is heroic because of the complete absurdity of their vow or their activity. But they do it anyway. They just do it anyway. Yes.
What is a being? How should we understand a being?
Sovereign consciousness. Which is not one thing.
What is a sovereign consciousness?
Not separate. I'm getting really excited.
Can you say more on that?
Wait, I want to see if there's more here from Jason.
I'm trying to understand how to understand consciousness when we have such a limited understanding of what consciousness can be.
This is called the path. What you just said is I'm trying to understand how consciousness. So you can't be a more open statement than the one you made. You're very open. I just say, just continue. Just continue. There's not an answer that I could give you that would it's not like an answer. It's not a concept. We're talking. I use concepts. You use concepts. We're chatting away here, and everyone has a different relationship to words and language. It has a different, fascination, fixation, connection to it. If you're free of it, then you're really able to use it. But if you believe and disbelieve, you're going to trip. Yes.
What do you mean by sovereign?
It is its own situation. It's sovereign. It doesn't mean it's impervious. It just means that it's its own. It's like having that candle. That candlelight it's light, but it's sovereign. You already know what I mean. Why don't you tell me?
How can something be sovereign and not separate?
Because it's not two different things. So it's very difficult to talk about because we're using language, plus and minus language. So we're always going to end up in at a dead end at the end of the alley with a brick wall, unless your awareness takes you beyond that, takes you beyond this and that, beyond duality. So you actually transcend this. That's what the practice is about. It's not about. This is not something to make us all feel better. It's about for us to actually see what is fundamentally true for it. It's a spiritual path. It's not a mundane path. So we can actually transcend our attachment to this world, to life and death. Yes.
How can a bodhisattva save all beings if they have a limited understanding of what is a being?
The vow to save all beings is an aspiration. We aspire, and there are stages on the path that are taught, 10, 11, 12, depending on the tradition. And so we start out, the first stage of that is actually seeing that you're not a solid being. You're still hooked on everything else being solid, but you actually begin to see that you're not solid. There's something shifting constantly, and there's no core anywhere to it. So that's called pramudita, or joy, the first bhumi bodhisattva. So he or she has some insight into this not being solid anymore. So then we look out as in the Tibetan tradition, it's called sotarpa, 1.5-fold egolessness, which I've talked about before. It's we see that we completely see through the skandhas. We see the 5 skandhas of form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness are without a self. They do not make up a solid being. This doesn't do away with sovereignty, but they don't make up a solid me who feels this way and has this idea. You can tell it's a very mutable situation, because the minute there's any kind of a threat, we feel disrespected. There's no one there to be disrespected. So it's an inspiration to do that. We have the inspiration. You've received the Bodhisattva vow twice, as a lay practitioner and as a full ordination. So you received it twice. So you're observing those precepts, how to be with all things. Yes.
2 questions.
Yes.
They're somewhat similar. The first one from Kozan in Traverse City. And she asks, you said what you're looking at instead of what you think you're looking at. How can we tell the difference?
You can't. I mean, you can't from the point of view of seeing that and say, oh, well, I'm going to stop doing that. It isn't that simple. But just to know that whatever you're seeing should be looked at very closely, and we should reflect on this and say, we should remember the Buddha's teaching and say, remind ourselves that everything is dependently arisen. And so excuse me, anything you see that looks like a solid separate thing is actually dependent on on everything else that looks like solid separate things for its identity. The most simple example of it, and this is quite astonishing, it's very simple. Everyone has this, and everyone has access to it, but rarely do we actually think about it. Go look in the mirror. Think about your mom and dad on a particular day in June, late in the afternoon in 19 whatever it was. They got together and they saw it. Do we want little Jimmy or not? Or whatever, the thing is that causes and conditions in the form of your mom and dad, they came together and you're here. And if something had interrupted that, there might be somebody here or not. Or there might be somebody not you at all. That whole area is so completely subtle and nuanced. It's incredible the things that are impinging on your apparent meanness. I. But look at all the things that happen that shake us out of our separation. All it takes is somebody scowling at you, and we're starting to think, well, what did I do? What did I say? But rather than actually look and just actually not know why they're scowling, which would be probably if there is such a thing as correct, that'd be the correct thing to do. Not know. Rather than go to some kind of imaginary, it must be because what I said 2 weeks ago, that's finally, or somebody told them that I stole their 1958 Buick and sold it. They finally found out. And then, of course, you go up and say, I'm really sorry I stole it. But they say, you're the one who stole it. More.
Question from Hyokudo up in Minnesota.
Yes, Hyokudo.
Her question, when you see things as they are, how do you know when it isn't a lie?
Well, it's always a lie. It's always right. Anything you see is relative truth. You can't see absolute truth because you're not separate from it. And of course, the more we use relative words and concepts to point at this, the more circular it sounds, and the more people want to go, this talk was over. Past 9 already. But I would say train your awareness, get your butt on the cushion if you come here or home, or spend some time just doing nothing but watching how your mind keeps cranking stuff up. Because you can't walk from here to the parking lot without having all kinds of thoughts and emotions and memories and judgments and comments, about everything from what somebody was wearing here, or what you were wearing, or shoes that don't fit, or just, it's ridiculous. One more question.
If there's no self and there's no other, then who is the bodhisattva saving?
All beings. There's an illusion of all beings. So until there is no illusion, you work with that. You put others before yourself, because everyone feels like they're separate, and everyone is suffering intensely. There isn't a person here that hasn't had some kind of intense suffering in their life, or anyone watching. I mean, it may have less than some people, but something has come into your life that's just been excruciating, and either not just physical pain, but emotional pain, suffering. It can get very, very difficult. And so as long as that's the case, there's an illusion of some kind of separation happening. And so when we receive or observe the Bodhisattva vow to be with all things, starting with your thought patterns, that's where you start. That's the training ground. Start by taking the very thoughts you keep objecting to and just look at them. Don't push them down, don't fluff them up, and don't look away. And that's where you begin to train to see what is happening. That way you bring that out into what we call post-meditation in your everyday life. And you actually start to see that the person you used to get mad at because they were mistreating you or being rude or being whatever, you begin to see right through without even trying. You see that they're doing that because they're suffering. Whereas before, all you could see was what an ass they were. And now, because of your prajna, which is the fancy word for see a lot deeper, beyond your preconceptions, in other words, through your preconceptions to what's probably happening back there on some level, is they're miserable. They don't want to be, and they don't know how to get rid of it. So how do people get rid of what's one of the ways people get rid of their suffering? Aggression. It actually feels good to get mad, punch something or somebody, or blame somebody. And of course, it isn't a kind of enjoyment where we would prefer. But if you're really upset, that's one way you can let off some steam, as they say. But the sitting practice of meditation might not do it right away. You might still blow your stack for a few more years. But eventually, it starts to back off. I rarely punch somebody anymore. I've never really punched anybody. I've punched a few walls, though. But I always make sure that I'm punching right between the two befores. Because if you hit a 2-before, that's the last wall you'll ever punch. I know it's not funny. Okay, so we can, unless there's another question there, okay, we can dedicate them. Thank you.
In the back of your red chant books is a dedication of merit and just a reminder that we have our donation boxes still readily available to take your donations.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Chi Shiru Shison Lu Samoko Sa Woko Jahoromi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who's unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.